The Galactic Coalition celebrated like never before across the stars. Their fleets had returned home in triumph, and their enemies were crushed in a war that had lasted for generations. Great parades filled orbital stations with banners and lights. The leaders stood tall and declared that the galaxy was finally at peace. Species that had long feared the constant threat of war now let out breaths they had held for centuries. They spoke of rebuilding worlds once scarred by endless battles. They spoke of opening trade routes that had been locked in conflict, and they dreamed of prosperity that none alive had ever truly known. In the council chambers of the core, the alien rulers gathered, their voices loud with pride. They reminded one another that their coalition was the greatest force the galaxy had ever seen. Their fleets outnumbered and outgunned any possible rival, and the old enemies were scattered into dust with no power to resist. This was a time for rejoicing, or so it seemed, but not all joined the celebration. Some remembered whispers from history books, stories told not to frighten children, but to remind leaders of a threat so old it had become myth. They spoke of humans, a species marked as dangerous beyond measure, for most of the council humans were nothing but shadows of a forgotten age. The record stated that Earth had burned in a war so violent that no one could have survived, that humans had torn themselves apart and vanished from the stars, it was believed. Their world became a husk. Their colonies lost their fleets, erased, and the galaxy free of them. But buried among ancient records were warnings placed by civilizations long since gone. Warnings that described humans not as fragile beings, but as survivors, who refused to die no matter the odds. During the celebrations, one scholar dared to raise this warning before the assembly. He reminded them that their victory, though great, could be short-lived. If the rumors of human survival were true, his words drew laughter from many. They mocked the idea that creatures once bound to a death world could rise again after so long. They compared it to the return of ghosts and myths. They believed themselves too powerful and too secure to fear such things. But even as they dismissed him, he left them with a chilling thought. What if the humans were not gone? What if they had been waiting, far from the shining council worlds? Patrol ships monitored the edges of space. They reported strange signals at first, thought to be interference, then perhaps remnants of old technology. But the signals repeated, they carried patterns that did not match the old enemy and did not belong to any known race among the patrol crews. There were quiet whispers. Some swore. The signals reminded them of old transmissions preserved in museums, crude and sharp, like the old human frequencies. The reports reached the council but were quickly buried. Leaders wanted no fear to spoil their moment of glory. They dismissed the signals as echoes from forgotten battles, relics of burned-out colonies or tricks of damaged sensors. Yet a few captains who had fought on the front lines felt uneasy. They had seen desperation in battle, and the stories of humans sounded too much, like desperation turned into a weapon. As the celebrations stretched across weeks, the mood of unity began to weaken. Small cracks appeared as doubt spread in private chambers. Ambassadors exchanged old tales of human wars. They remembered recordings of battles where humans had refused to surrender even when entire fleets were lost. They remembered that humans adapted to poisons, climates, and even weapons that destroyed others. They remembered that humans always returned stronger after every defeat. Those whispers slowly grew louder, and the triumph began to taste less like victory and more like the calm before a storm. On distant worlds far from the center of power, traders and smugglers spoke of seeing ships in deep lanes, vessels that carried markings unknown to any coalition fleet. They were built different, not elegant like coalition cruisers, but efficient, sharp, and brutal in their design. And though no proof was offered, the rumors always ended with the same words. They looked human. In the hearts of the council, celebration still rang, but in the shadows of their halls, fear began to awaken. Fear that their great triumph was not the end of war, but the spark that would call back a predator. Long thought extinct, the galaxy rejoiced, yet for the first time in centuries some began to wonder if their victory had already doomed them, if humans truly were on their way. The council chamber glowed with the light of victory banners, but beneath the surface, there was unease, as the rumors of human survival refused to die down. The scholar who had raised the warning stood accused of fear-mongering, yet even his opponents could not dismiss the unease growing within their own minds when the first patrol ships had reported Strange signals, the council declared them errors when smugglers spoke of unknown vessels. The council laughed it off, but the whispers did not fade. In fact, they spread and grew louder. Archivists were summoned to present the records of ancient wars. When humanity had been part of the galactic stage, the counselors watched fragments of old battles captured by alien observers. They saw human ships fighting against fleets 3 times their size. They saw crude weapons used with brutal efficiency. They saw soldiers fighting on worlds with gravity that crushed most other species into the dirt. Yet the humans stood. The council members tried to remind themselves these were old recordings from a time long past, but the images lingered and unsettled. Their hearts a debate erupted between the factions. Some insisted that humans were long extinct. Earth was marked a dead world, its oceans boiled, its skies poisoned. How could such a place have birthed survivors? Others argued that humanity's reputation was built on their refusal to die. The harsher the world, the stronger they became. Perhaps destruction had not erased them, but tempered them into something even more dangerous. One elder of the council rose and reminded the chamber that humanity was not just feared for their strength or their weapons, but for their adaptability. They were the only species known to thrive on Death World's planets, where life itself was violent storms, constant earthquakes, predators more savage than nightmares. Where other species saw death, humans carved homes. Where other species starved, humans grew food. Where others froze or burned, humans endured. This truth made the council tremble, because if humanity had survived destruction, it was certain they had grown stronger. Still, the rulers tried to silence the debate by declaring the war finally ended, and peace assured. They told their citizens the strange signals were nothing more than old wreckage. They declared humanity a ghost best forgotten, but soldiers stationed along the outer borders began to share different stories. Quiet rumors of strange attacks on abandoned mining stations, skirmishes where survivors swore their attackers were unlike any coalition force ship, scarred from countless battles but relentless and efficient. Some described the strange emblem painted on their hulls. Simple geometric patterns, bold and unrefined, yet chilling in their familiarity. The council ordered an investigation, but only in secret. They feared to ignite panic among the citizens. Fleets were quietly dispatched to scan the edges of space. Cloaked probes were launched into the deep void, and scholars were tasked with deciphering the strange transmissions. One discovery shook the investigators. The signals carried rhythms that matched the old human languages. They were coded but familiar, like the voice of a ghost echoing through time. As these findings trickled back to the council, fear became anger. Many leaders demanded silence. They claimed humanity was gone, and these discoveries should be locked away. But a smaller group whispered that hiding the truth would only make things worse. They pressed the council to prepare the fleets to strengthen the borders, to arm themselves for a return of an enemy too terrible to face unprepared. Among the common citizens, the celebration continued. They filled the plazas with music and light. They shouted of peace and prosperity, never knowing that in the private halls of power their leaders were trembling. The illusion of safety was already cracking. The more the council tried to bury the truth, the more it returned like an infection in the bloodstream of their victory. And so the galaxy stood divided. On one side, a triumphant coalition basking in the glow of its greatest victory. On the other, a handful of wary voices warning that the true danger had not yet come. That humanity, long thought extinct, was stirring in the shadows, preparing to return with fury. The council could silence whispers, but they could not silence the fear already spreading through every corner of the stars. A fear that their greatest triumph was only the beginning of a much darker story. On the edge of coalition space, the stars glittered with quiet indifference. While patrol ships moved along forgotten lanes, their captains restless with the unease that had begun to spread. One such patrol reported a sighting of vessels unlike anything recorded in coalition archives. They were sharp and angular, lacking the elegance of coalition craft, but built with a brutal purpose. The patrol tried to make contact, yet the vessels responded only with silence. Then in a sudden movement they vanished into faster-than-light jumps, leaving behind nothing but tension and fear. The reports traveled slowly through official channels. The council attempted to downplay them, claiming the sightings were smuggler tricks or ghosts of old data. Yet among the fleet officers who had seen the strange vessels with their own eyes, the truth could not be denied. These ships were real. and their patterns did not belong to any known species. Rumors grew stronger and stronger. Whispers said that survivors of border raids had seen hulls marked with bold symbols, strange stripes, and stars painted as if to declare identity with pride. The word human began to creep into every hushed conversation. On a mining station near the rim, survivors of an attack staggered back with terror in their eyes. They described boarding parties that fought with a ferocity unlike any they had seen before. These fighters were not tall like some species nor armored like others, but they moved with speed and precision that overwhelmed their defenses. They fought as if every strike mattered, as if surrender was not in their blood. The survivors swore the fighters looked human. Though scarred, weathered, and clad in gear, patched together from countless battles, the council refused to accept the reports. But they could not erase the fear spreading through their fleets. Historians in hidden chambers revisited old files from the last time humans were known to walk the stars. They discovered something the coalition had long ignored. Humans had never been defeated. They had been lost to their own wars, their world broken by their own hands. No fleet, no empire had ever destroyed them fully. This realization brought a grim truth. If they had survived the ruin of their own world, they could have survived anything. Perhaps the destruction of Earth was not the end but the beginning of their long silence coalition. Scientists tried to analyze the transmissions captured by probes scattered along the void. The codes carried patterns not fully understood, but their rhythms were unnervingly close. To human languages, though distorted and changed by centuries, the message was clear. These were not ghosts. These were voices trying to remain hidden yet leaving enough behind to be noticed to those who listened closely. The signals seemed almost deliberate, like warnings or perhaps declarations of return. In the council chambers, the divide grew sharper. Some leaders shouted that action must be taken. Fleets prepared weapons, raised planets fortified against the possibility of invasion. Others argued for diplomacy, insisting that humanity might not seek war but return in search of survival. The conflict of opinion cracked the unity of their hard-won triumph. The coalition that had once stood together in victory now began to splinter over the question of humans. Among the citizens, rumors raced faster than the council could silence them. Smugglers claimed they had seen human fleets gathering near abandoned colonies. Merchants whispered of ships vanishing into the void with no explanation. Soldiers carried tales of comrades who never returned from patrols all the while. The stories painted humans not as a forgotten people, but as predators, watching and waiting for the right time to strike. The truth was still uncertain, but one fact began to solidify across the stars: humans were no longer a myth. They were moving, and their presence was undeniable. Whether they came as conquerors or survivors, none could say, but fear crept into every heart. Because deep down, every species remembered the stories told by their ancestors of a relentless enemy who never gave up, who fought not just with weapons but with will itself. And now the shadows of those stories had stepped once more into the light. The council chamber, once filled with celebration, now echoed with unease as the leaders gathered once more to address the growing storm. The reports of strange vessels continued to increase. Patrols sent to investigate often failed to return. Those that did came back shaken and unwilling to speak openly about what they had seen. But whispers told of ships with designs brutal and efficient crews that fought with impossible determination, and weapons that, while not advanced in the way coalition fleets understood, were terrifyingly effective against even the most modern defenses. The debates within the council turned bitter. Some leaders demanded immediate mobilization of every fleet. They argued that if humanity was returning, it would be with vengeance and fury, and the coalition could not afford to wait for proof. Others dismissed such fear, calling it paranoia. They clung to the belief that humans had destroyed themselves long ago, and any strange sightings were nothing more than desperate pirates or clever raiders trying to stir panic. But the voices of reason began to fade as fear spread like wildfire through the corridors of power. Archivists were summoned once again to show the ancient records of human wars. This time the focus was not only on battles but on the way humanity had fought. They were shown charging into hopeless situations not with recklessness but with a calculated brutality that shattered their enemies. Resolve, they were shown adapting within moments to new weapons, poisons, and environments. They were shown surviving where no other species could live when the records ended. The chamber was silent, because no one could deny the simple truth. Humans were different. They were not stronger in body than every species. Nor did they possess the most advanced technology, but their will to endure made them something more frightening than any machine. Scientists added their voices. They revealed data from the intercepted transmissions. The patterns once dismissed as noise had now been decoded into fragments of words unmistakably human, though changed by centuries of exile. The meaning was clear. These were not ghosts or echoes. These were deliberate signals. Humanity was out there alive and reaching toward the galaxy once more. The council chamber fell into chaos. Some demanded preparations for peace, sending envoys and offering diplomacy. They believed that if humanity was returning, they could be welcomed as allies, perhaps even guided into the coalition. Others sneered at such ideas, saying that to open the gates was to invite death. They pointed to the records of wars where humans had turned every battlefield into a slaughter, and they reminded the chamber that even when facing extinction, humanity had never stopped fighting. Fear grew heavier than logic, and it spread beyond the chamber into the fleet stationed at the edges of space. Captains found their crews restless. Soldiers shared old tales of humanity as monsters who thrived in chaos and conquered with relentless fury. Planets near the borders began to prepare shelters and drills. Citizens who only weeks earlier had danced in the streets of victory now whispered of dark skies filled with human warships. On one world near the frontier, a colony governor sent a desperate message to the council. He claimed that a fleet of unknown ships had passed close to the system, moving in tight formation with discipline that suggested military precision. He swore they bore the same strange markings as described before, and though the fleet did not attack, the people of the colony lived in terror that their world was being watched, tested, or perhaps marked for later conquest. The coalition could no longer hide behind denial. Their victory no longer felt real. In fact, it felt hollow, because even as they celebrated, an older, deeper fear had awakened and now controlled their every thought. In the silence of the chamber, a single truth remained unspoken, but understood by all. If humanity had returned, the galaxy would never be the same, and every species would soon face a reckoning unlike any they had ever imagined. The silence of space shattered when the first confirmed human fleet arrived at the edge of coalition territory. The system chosen for their appearance was a quiet border world, a mining colony known for its calm and isolation. The people there had never expected to witness history. Yet they became the first to face what had long been whispered as myth. Sensors lit up with dozens of approaching vessels, their signatures alien yet strangely familiar. They were not sleek like coalition ships. They were not decorated with ornate hulls or polished designs. Instead, they were shaped with brutal function, every surface angled for war, every line drawn with purpose. The colonial defenses scrambled to respond, but hesitation hung heavy. No one wanted to be the first to fire upon something that might ignite war. Still, the fear of annihilation forced their hands. Defense cannons locked on fighters, launched into the void, and fleets stationed nearby were summoned. Then the first exchange began. The human fleet moved with terrifying precision. Their weapons were not as advanced in energy output, but every shot was placed with deadly accuracy. Their missiles streaked through space faster than expected, twisting with adaptive guidance that coalition systems had never encountered before. Entire squadrons of fighters vanished in fire before they had time to retreat. Observers watching from the safety of the colony could not believe what they saw. Humans fought with no hesitation. They adapted to countermeasures within moments. If a formation of coalition ships tried a maneuver, it succeeded only once. After that, the humans shifted and, struck from a new angle, they did not waste fire. They did not fight recklessly. They fought like predators honed by centuries of survival, and it soon became clear that technology alone could not compensate for the terrifying will behind those ships. When the battle ended hours later, the coalition had lost 2 patrol fleets and the colony's outer defenses were left in ruins. Yet what unsettled them most was that the humans had not pressed the advantage they had struck with precision, then pulled away, vanishing back into the void without occupying the world. The people left behind stared at the wreckage and asked why, if the humans had the power to destroy. Why did they leave, and what did it mean? The council received the reports with horror. The images of human warships filled their chamber, their hulls marked with symbols of bold lines and stars, simple compared to the ornate banners of the coalition. But carried with pride and power, the councilors could not deny the truth any longer. Humanity was alive, and not only alive, but capable of standing against the most advanced fleets of the galaxy. Panic spread across the stars' border worlds fortified. Themselves trade routes were rerouted, fleets recalled from celebration duties to form desperate defenses. But beneath all the fear, a question lingered. What did humanity want? Some believed they sought revenge for their forgotten extinction. Others believed they had come back to reclaim lost homes and colonies, and some whispered of something worse, that they had grown beyond war, as the coalition understood it, and now moved with purpose. No one else could yet see. Among the common people, fear gave birth to fascination. Stories of the human fleet spread like wildfire. Traders spoke of their crude but unbreakable ships. Smugglers claimed they had traded with them, and soldiers retold tales of boarding parties who fought with terrifying silence and discipline to many citizens. Humans were not just enemies, they were legends come alive. A reminder that the galaxy was not as safe or as controlled as the Council had promised. In the shadows of the Council chamber, a realization grew. Their great triumph had ended before it began, because humanity had returned. Not as broken survivors, but as a force tempered by centuries of struggle and loss. Their weapons were efficient, their tactics relentless, their will unshakable. The coalition had believed victory was eternal, but now they understood they were standing at the beginning of a storm, one that no celebration could hold back. The coalition fleets had barely recovered from the first shock when intelligence reports confirmed that the humans were not stopping at border worlds. They were moving with purpose across systems that were thought to be safe supply convoys, vanished without trace. Entire mining operations were crippled, and yet no single world was fully occupied. The humans struck fast and vanished, leaving confusion and fear in their wake. Commanders debated endlessly in council chambers and war rooms. Strategies were proposed and discarded. Each plan found lacking, because the humans did not fight like any enemy they had faced before. They were unpredictable yet precise, fierce yet disciplined, their attacks calculated with an understanding of human nature that the coalition could not comprehend. At the heart of the coalition capital, the council struggled to maintain authority. The first fleets that were destroyed had been prideful patrols sent to showcase dominance, and now commanders were being replaced faster than they could adapt. Generals and admirals were recalled from distant systems, their confidence shaken by reports of entire sectors being rendered vulnerable by human incursions. The council realized too late that their centuries of arrogance had blinded them to the resilience of a species they had written off as extinct. The humans did not seek glory in battle, they sought objectives that only they understood, and each success emboldened them further, making the coalition nervous and reactive rather than proactive. Meanwhile, in the outer rim worlds, humans were becoming almost mythical to the inhabitants. Traders spoke of shadow fleets that appeared from nowhere, supplying desperate colonies with food, medicine, and technology in exchange for information or nothing at all. And when the coalition tried to strike those settlements, they found the humans already gone. The impression spread that humans could appear anywhere and strike anywhere at any time, leaving an aura of inevitability around them, and the coalition could do nothing but chase shadows and wonder when the next blow would fall. On board the flagship of the largest human contingent, the captain surveyed the systems through the vast observation window. He saw stars, but beyond them, he saw the future, a galaxy that had underestimated humanity for centuries now. Trembling at their return, the crew moved with silent efficiency, each action precise and deliberate. There was no room for hesitation, for doubt. They had trained for this moment for generations. Each human aboard knew the weight of history that bore down on them, and they carried it with a quiet dignity as they planned the next moves their fleet. A living testament to what humanity could achieve when pushed to the edge of survival and molded by adversity. Back in the council halls, debate raged over what should be done. The humans were no longer an isolated fleet. They were a force capable of striking multiple sectors simultaneously, and the council began to see that conventional strategies would not work against them. The humans were always a step ahead in understanding. They anticipated reactions and adapted in ways that made the coalition seem slow and cumbersome. Fear turned to desperation, and desperation led to mistakes. Fleets collided with each other in uncoordinated movements, leaving vulnerable points that the humans exploited. And the Council realized that the humans had not even begun to fight in full force. Yet the warning signs were clear. The galaxy was about to face a reckoning. In the neutral sectors, civilians watched. The unfolding events, with a mix of awe and terror and reports of human encounters, circulated from one world to another. Entire communities organized militias, not because they wanted to fight, but because they feared the humans might appear and demand they be ready for anything. Stories spread of human bravery and ruthlessness in equal measure. They became legends, not just in the sense of tales, but in the reality of their capability. Every encounter reinforced the belief that humans were not merely survivors but masters of adaptation and strategy that the Coalition had never accounted for. As weeks turned into months, the humans continued their pattern, relentless, precise striking where necessary and disappearing when advantageous, leaving the Coalition to struggle with the reality that they had been complacent for too long. Every counselor began to understand that the humans had returned, not to negotiate, not to plead, but to reclaim and survive. And the galaxy was about to witness the full measure of human determination and skill that no fleet could contain, no diplomacy could sway, and no council could fully comprehend. The galaxy shuddered under the weight of anticipation as humans advanced with unstoppable momentum. Every world they touched felt the presence of something ancient, yet renewed, a force that defied expectation and challenged the very foundations of the Coalition. The flagship fleets of the Coalition scrambled to respond, but human strategy was already several steps ahead. They struck at supply lines, communication hubs, and orbital defenses with a precision that seemed almost preternatural. And the Coalition realized in horror that every move they had made for centuries could be anticipated and countered with terrifying efficiency. On the edge of the war-torn systems, human admirals conferred quietly, their voices calm but filled with resolve, their minds sharpened by years of preparation and centuries of human history that had forged their instincts. They studied star charts and enemy movements, not with fear, but with calculation and determination. Their fleets moved as a single organism, each vessel aware of its role and purpose. And when they appeared in a system, the locals knew that the humans were not there to negotiate. They were there to achieve their objective, to strike swiftly and then vanish, leaving only certainty and the lingering question of what their next move might be. Coalition commanders were growing. Desperate, their attempts to outmaneuver the humans collapsed in chaos. Fleets collided in uncoordinated assaults, leaving openings that humans exploited with deadly efficiency. Entire garrisons vanished without a fight. The psychological effect was immense as soldiers began to question whether they were fighting an enemy at all, or something beyond comprehension, as word of human tactics spread through Coalition ranks. Fear spread faster than orders could be given. Generals second-guessed themselves, and admirals hesitated as their instincts screamed that humans were not merely opponents, but a force of nature that refused to be contained. On a distant death world, the humans landed with a precision landing that stunned the planet's inhabitants. Their boots kicked up dust and ash as they moved with silent coordination. The locals watched in awe and terror as these humans organized themselves into squads and patrols that seemed to anticipate every challenge. The humans did not waste resources. They did not shout or boast. They acted with efficiency and intelligence, and every action was purposeful and meaningful, teaching the Coalition that human adaptability was not just skill. It was instinct born of survival and honed into a weapon, more powerful than fleets or armies. Back in the Coalition capital, panic turned to chaos as council chambers became arenas of blame and recrimination. Fleet movements were mismanaged, and miscommunication spread like wildfire. The humans, however, maintained cohesion across light years, their fleets an unbroken chain of strategy and precision. While the Coalition fractured under pressure, the Council could only watch helplessly as their systems fell one by one, and the reality sank, in that humans had returned not as isolated survivors, but as a unified force that would not be denied, and their return heralded a new era that no political maneuvering could stop. Across neutral sectors and allied worlds, the stories of human triumph grew more elaborate with each retelling. The humans were no longer simply soldiers or explorers. They were legends made flesh, living embodiments of determination, courage, and intellect. Civilizations that had feared extinction now looked to them with hope and awe. Their presence alone inspired coordination and bravery among those who had resigned themselves to oppression or subjugation. And the galaxy began to see that humans were not merely fighting for themselves, but for principles that transcended species or politics. As the final engagement approached, humans and coalition forces faced each other across a starfield. Thick with tension, the humans were calm, confident, ready to deliver the decisive blow that would echo across generations. Every maneuver they executed was calculated, every strike precise. The coalition tried to respond with numbers and firepower, but it was not enough. Human ingenuity, strategy, and the will to survive were overwhelming, and one by one coalition ships fell or fled, leaving the humans with clear control of the battlefield. Their victory was not just physical but psychological, showing the galaxy that underestimating humans was the gravest error any civilization could make. When the smoke cleared, the coalition was left shattered, their command structures broken and their pride destroyed, while humans stood victorious, their fleets intact, their objectives completed, and their reputation cemented across the stars. The galaxy had witnessed the power of humanity in full force. A species that had been dismissed as extinct now commanded respect, fear, and admiration across countless worlds. The humans had returned, not for conquest but for survival. And in doing so, they had reshaped the understanding of strength, resilience, and destiny for every being that inhabited the stars. The Council disbanded the fleets, withdrew the humans, established new contact points across systems once thought lost, and civilization slowly began to adjust to a galaxy where humans were the standard by which strength, strategy, and courage were measured, and legends would speak of this time for centuries to come. A time when humanity returned to remind the galaxy that underestimating them had always been a mistake, and their place among the stars was undeniable. The galaxy breathed a tense silence as the dust of battle settled the remnants of the coalition. Fleets drifted like broken ghosts across the star-strewn void while humans stood unbroken, their ships gleaming under distant suns, their presence a testament to endurance, intelligence, and unyielding will. Every world that had witnessed the advance of humans now spoke in hushed tones of awe and fear. The story spread faster than any fleet could travel, whispers of a species that had risen from legend to legend made real and unstoppable. Human commanders moved among their crews, their eyes calm and calculating, their voices steady as they coordinated relief efforts, reconstruction, and the establishment of new alliances. They did not celebrate recklessly, because humans understood that survival required preparation and foresight, that triumph was not merely a moment, but a responsibility. They began to teach the liberated worlds about unity, strategy, and self-reliance, showing that humanity's strength was not only in battle but in guidance, inspiration, and unwavering determination. The coalition leaders who survived fled to distant sectors carrying tales of defeat that bordered on disbelief. Their arrogance shattered their systems in ruin and their soldiers disheartened. Humanity had proven that no quantity of ships, technology, or intimidation could match the ingenuity, courage, and adaptability of humans who had survived centuries of extinction myths and persecution, only to return stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever before. The galaxy would remember that lesson for eons. On remote planets, the echoes of human actions inspired local populations to rise against oppression and tyranny. They watched humans rebuild devastated cities, terraform hostile worlds, and secure trade routes that had been impossible to navigate. Their admiration turned to respect, their fear transformed into loyalty and hope. Humanity had demonstrated that even in the darkest corners of space, determination, skill, and unity could overcome any obstacle. The humans became beacons guiding civilizations toward cooperation, innovation, and survival. In council chambers, long-abandoned humans established a new framework of governance, consultation, and protection. They did not impose tyranny or fear, but offered assistance, intelligence, and coordination to species willing to learn to cooperate to thrive together. The galaxy witnessed the birth of a new era, a period defined not by war alone, but by progress, understanding, and the influence of a species whose very existence defied expectation and reshaped reality itself. Legends were written in real time, The humans became mythic figures across systems from icy moons to dense jungles to orbiting metropolises. People told of their bravery, precision and intellect, of their ability to turn the tide of battle in ways that no one could have predicted. The galaxy no longer spoke of humans as extinct, as weak, or as inconsequential, but as the benchmark of resilience, strength, and unparalleled ingenuity. Civilizations recalibrated their strategies, knowing that to challenge humanity was to court disaster. As the stars shimmered overhead and peace slowly returned, humans continued their silent vigil, their fleets patrolling borders, their scientists exploring new technologies, their diplomats weaving networks of alliances and trust their presence. A constant reminder that survival in the galaxy required more than strength. It required adaptability, courage, and a mind willing to learn and evolve. Humanity had not only returned, they had secured their place at the pinnacle of existence, proving to every species that underestimating humans had always been a mistake. And so the galaxy changed forever, not with a single battle, but with the enduring legacy of a species that refused to be forgotten, that transformed fear into respect, that turned legends into living proof of excellence, and that reminded every being that true power lay not just in weaponry, but in intellect, heart, and willpower. The humans had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The end.